We're going to cut down the intro. You know why you're here. We're looking at Dynasty Sleepers. Let's jump into our first one. Demario Douglas. So, I like Demario Douglas a lot, but I think people are kind of sleeping on him because he's on the Patriots. The Patriots are boring. Not an exciting offense. We're not happy about them for 2024. So, people kind of dismiss him. And let's take a look at what he did last year. In 2023, Douglas played 14 games. He had 49 catches, 561 yards, 3.5 catches, and 40.1 yards a game, 7.7 PPR points per game. Now, on the surface, that's not great, but we know that the Patriots were a dumpster fire last year. So in context, as a sixth-round rookie, he actually did pretty well. And that takes us into our next point. Why Demario Douglas is a dynasty sleeper. He led the 2023 Patriots in targets and yards as a sixth-round rookie. That's hard to do as any rookie, let alone a sixth-round rookie who wasn't expected to maybe even make the team, let alone have a role. And possible touchdown regression. He had 0. So there's only one way to go from 0 is up. Now, I have some more points about this. Obviously, he dealt with horrible quarterback play. We know that the 2023 Patriots quarterbacks were horrible. You don't need me to tell you that. But there are some additional statistics that show that there were some problems. Douglas only had a 69.2% catchable target rate, 56th among wide receivers. So he didn't have good catchable targets. He had 11.2 expected fantasy points per game versus 7.7 actual. So what that means is that based on his role, he should have had more fantasy points, but he was unlucky. He didn't get those fantasy points. He had a high target rate for a rookie at 24.8% target rate. So what that means is when he was available to be targeted, he was targeted on 24.8% of those plays. 22nd among wide receivers, all wide receivers. That's pretty good. That's a sign that he earned a lot of targets as a rookie. Now, Douglas played the first 5 weeks in kind of a limited role. After missing week 6, Douglas took on a higher snap share and a larger role. He improved to 4.3 catches and 46.4 yards per game over the final 9 games. So not a lot better, but significantly more volume. In a better offense, Douglas might take a step forward. Now, on Keep Trade Cut, Douglas is just wide receiver 65. So he can be acquired in startups or as a trade throw-in piece rather easily. Look, I like Jalen Polk. I think he's a good player. I'm happy that the Patriots maybe overdrafted him, but I do think he has good opportunity. But I think people are just dismissing Demario Douglas because they were excited about Javon Baker pre-draft. And Douglas has actually been good in the NFL. Baker has not. It's a 4th-round pick. I would rather have Douglas, who we've already seen all these metrics say that he has potential to grow, has been successful. I'm not saying you should trade a 2nd-round pick for Douglas. I'm saying you should draft him in a startup. Maybe look at, if you're doing a bigger trade, acquiring him as a throw-in piece, because I think that's a good method to acquire these types of sleepers. Now, our second sleeper is Ty Chandler. So I didn't really think Ty Chandler was much of a sleeper. Apparently, he's a lot lower in dynasty ranks than I thought. So let's take a look at why. In 2022, as a rookie, he didn't do much. He had 6 carries for 20 yards in 3 games. He barely played. But then last year, he had 102 carries, 461 yards, 3 touchdowns, 4.5 yards a carry, and 21 catches, 159 yards, 6.3 PPR points per game. But the fantasy points per game really don't tell the full story with Ty Chandler. So Ty Chandler played well after he became the starter. And the only obstacle is a 29-year-old Aaron Jones, who, while I like, is getting really up there in running back years. Now, the reason why the points per game doesn't mean anything for Chandler is Chandler started the final 4 games for the Vikings in 2023 and wasn't that involved beforehand. Over those final 4 games, where he had over half of his carries, he averaged 13.3 carries, 64.5 yards, and 2 catches, 17.3 yards in those 4 games, scoring 2 touchdowns. Now, Chandler entered the NFL with a high athleticism score, including a 4.38 40-yard dash. He performed well in 2023 with 4.3 true yards per carry and 5 yards per touch, which is 22nd and 18th among running backs. And then there are some issues with Aaron Jones. He struggled with injuries in 2023, which limited him to 11 games. Jones is also not a workhorse back. He's never, not even once, averaged 15 carries a game, never averaged 18 total touches a game in any of his 7 seasons in the NFL. But Chandler's the backup, so he's buried in dynasty ranks. Now, normally, I would say, oh, Chandler, small sample size, oh, an older player, oh, I don't want him. But he's the running back 59 on Keep Trade Cut. So it's not like Zamir White, who I talked about, who's running back 20. Ty Chandler is buried. And yes, Ty Chandler is the backup to Aaron Jones. Yes, I am not saying that Ty Chandler is going to be the week 1 starter. I am not saying that. What I am saying is 2 things. One, Aaron Jones is not a workhorse, has never been a workhorse, and has shared work his entire career, and now he's 29. Ty Chandler will play on the field. He will have an opportunity to earn more carries. Aaron Jones is on a 1-year deal. There's no loyalty to Aaron Jones. Ty Chandler is a good depth or handcuff running back at this price. No, you can't start him week 1. No, you can't count him in week 1. But if Aaron Jones went down, you know that you can trust Ty Chandler. It's the same coaching staff where he was successful last year. You know that if he is the starter, you will be able to play him. And those are the types of sleepers that can help elevate your dynasty roster throughout the year. Now, if you like my YouTube content, you should sign up for the Patreon. You get my rankings, access to the Discord, and the ability to ask in advance questions for these YouTube videos. Tiers begin at just $6 a month. And I also have Patreon roster reviews, which are available only for patrons and are posted in the Patreon Discord. I really appreciate everyone who signed up and any new patrons who join. With that said, let's get into our next player, Michael Wilson. Now, I will say Michael Wilson doesn't have the same kind of advanced statistics as Demario Douglas in his favor. He doesn't. But what he does have was a pretty successful and under-the-radar rookie year. In 13 games, he had 38 catches, 565 yards, and 3 touchdowns, 2.9 catches, and 43.5 yards a game, 8.8 PPR points per game. I don't think people remember that he had 565 yards as a rookie. Now, why is Wilson a dynasty sleeper? Surprisingly high production. He played as a starter for most of 2023, and I think he's forgotten. I think everyone sees Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride, and they just stop there. While that's probably fair, that doesn't mean that another wide receiver couldn't be somewhat relevant on the team. I'm not saying they're going to be great. Now, I'm not saying again that Wilson will be a star, because he won't. But Marquise Brown and Rondale Moore are gone, and they were replaced with just Zay Jones. Now, Wilson played 80.8% of snaps as a rookie. And to be fair, he could have been more effective in earning targets. It wasn't a strength of his. But he did have 1.97 fantasy points per target, 26th among wide receivers. So he was successful on a per target basis, unlike someone like Quentin Johnson, who was a failure everywhere. Now, Wilson is just wide receiver 71 on Keep Trade Cut, lower than many of his metrics from 2023. And look, most likely when Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride are healthy, I'm not expecting Michael Wilson to be even a top 40 wide receiver on those weeks. But is there not a possibility that Wilson could show that he has talent that we saw coming into the NFL, that we saw in year 1, and have some touchdowns, some production, and be worth more than he is now? Maybe. So it's just something to consider. And I think he's just forgotten about, because a lot of people, if I told you that Michael Wilson had 565 yards in 13 games, 43.5 yards a game, I think that's higher than people would remember from Michael Wilson. So that's why I have him as a sleeper. Now, I always like to cover breaking news on here. I don't know if this really qualifies, but Cam Akers signed with the Texans. Whoa. I don't have much hope for Akers. He's torn his left Achilles twice since 2021. Joe Mixon apparently has a minor issue that's keeping him out of camp for now. I don't see that as a major issue right now, especially with how much the Texans have been talking him up. Therefore, Akers seems more like a camp body and competition for RB3 with rookie Jawar Jordan, as Dare Ogunbowale is primarily a special teams player. For now, I do not project Akers to make the team. I have him running back 96, similar to someone like Israel Abanikanda. We've seen them play in the NFL. They might catch on somewhere, but right now I don't have him projected to make his current roster. He's not a must add in most Dynasty leagues. I'm just done with Cam Akers. As for Jawar Jordan, I moved him down a couple of spots. It's not good that he now has competition for his roster spot. Ogunbowale is there for special teams. Obviously, Joe Mixon and Dameon Pierce are roster locks. So Jordan and Akers are fighting for one spot. I mean, there's not spots for both of them. Considering that Akers adds nothing on special teams, I'd lean that Jordan gets the spot. But there's now a chance that he doesn't make the team, whereas before he was basically a roster lock. Obviously, if Akers is anywhere near healthy, he's a far superior talent to Jordan, but I don't know if that's the case. We'll see. This will be an interesting battle to keep an eye on. I'd lean toward Jordan, but, there's a chance that Akers beats him out. But otherwise, I don't think this is major news at all. Now, we're going to get into the Patreon questions. I have 3 of those, so let's jump into those right now. One of them is in the news today. Outlook for TJ Hockenson in 2024. Is he someone you're buying or avoiding in all formats? Some are saying that Hockenson is ahead of schedule in his rehab. What does that even mean? That doesn't mean anything. For redraft 2024 outlook, it's simple. I don't think Hockenson's going to play week 1. I don't think he'll be effective for most of the season. For 2024 alone, I'm not interested. I'll let someone else draft him. For Dynasty, he'll turn 28 in July 2025. We've seen tight ends be successful for a long time. His contract's pretty ironclad for 2025, but the Vikings can get out after that. In 2023, Hockenson was great. He averaged 6.3 catches and 64 yards a game despite uneven quarterback play. In Dynasty, I don't mind him. Not really someone I'm targeting right now. Maybe in a couple weeks when he's still injured. Now, the next question. Realistic expectations for Brian Thomas Jr. year 1. Lots of vacant targets he could step into. Do you expect him to carve out a 100 target role year 1? I mean, yes, it's possible. The role does exist. Calvin Ridley and Zay Jones combined for 200 targets and are replaced directly by Brian Thomas and Gabe Davis. But just because the role's there doesn't mean that someone will fill it. You have to earn the targets. Otherwise, it just kind of gets all spread out or targets just don't exist. You have to earn the targets. But he does have the opportunity. It's not like there's, let's say, Calvin Ridley was still there. Then I would say it's going to be hard because there's 2 players in Ridley and Kirk who are also really good, who would prevent him from earning those targets maybe in year 1, hold him back a little bit. But he still has to earn it, even though there is a path, which is at least good. Thomas is receiving over-under set at 750. If that's all he gets, I would say he has less than 100 targets, but that always builds in a risk of injury. If Thomas plays a full 17 games, I'd say he does hit around 100 targets, maybe a little bit more, but I'm not expecting that much more. I think we're hoping for flashes of Thomas, maybe a second half power stretch, but not a consistent role from week 1, year 1. Lastly, outlook on the Kansas City wide receiver room with the Worthy, Hype, and Brown in. Do you just want a slice of the pie? Are you predicting an alpha coming out by year end? Could this be Mahomes' best year? So, I mean, we'll see. For now, I think if Rashee Rice is playing, he'll be the top wide receiver. Long term, I think Xavier Worthy has the most upside. I don't want Marquise Brown really at all. I'm souring on him pretty big time. As for it being Mahomes' best year, it's certainly possible. But beating his 2018 campaign where he had prime Travis Kelce and prime Tyreek Hill feels unlikely. So, yeah, I mean, of course, it's Patrick Mahomes. He could have his best year. Would I predict that it's his best year? Probably not, but it's possible. Now, if you like the video, make sure to drop a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. As always, the best way to support the channel is to subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notifications bell so you can be notified about all my exciting content as it drops here. Of course, if you want my best fantasy football advice, it's available on the Patreon, Dynasty, Redraft, Start Sit, and more. Every sign-up helps support my independent content. But once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all later.